When you miss people, but don't want to be a burden. Sometimes loneliness isn't about missing people. It's about missing them quietly, about holding back a phone call, about pausing before sending a message, about thinking, they're busy, I don't want to bother them. You still care. You still think of them. You just don't want to add weight to anyone else's life. So you carry your feelings on your own, not because they aren't important, but because you've spent a lifetime being the one who handled things, the one who didn't complain, the one who didn't need much. And now, even when your heart feels heavy, you hesitate. If that sounds familiar, you're not needy, you're not weak. You're someone who learned to love others by not asking for too much. And this conversation is for you. 1. The burden you never speak about. There is a weight you carry that almost no one knows about. Not because it's small, but because you learned early to keep it to yourself. You don't talk about it because you don't want to be that person. The one who always needs something. The one who takes up too much space. Sometimes loneliness comes from believing your feelings are a burden to others. So before you reach out, you pause. You replay the message in your head. You shorten it. You erase it. You tell yourself, they have enough going on. I'll handle it. And most days, you do. You've learned how to sit with your feelings, how to quiet them, how to carry them without letting them spill. But what you rarely admit, even to yourself, is how heavy that gets. Because the burden you fear becoming is actually the loneliness of never letting anyone carry even a small piece of your heart. And that kind of loneliness doesn't show on the outside, but it settles in deeply. 2. Learning to need less. At some point, you learned how to need less, not because your needs disappeared, but because it felt safer not to have them. You learned to manage on your own, to solve things quietly, to sit with discomfort without letting anyone know. Needing less often begins after needing too much went unanswered. So you adjusted. You stopped asking for help. You stopped sharing what was heavy. You told yourself it was easier this way. And in many ways, it was. You became independent, capable, low maintenance. People admired that about you. But what they didn't see was the cost. Each time you chose not to reach out, a small part of you learned to shrink its expectations. Not because connection didn't matter, but because it felt uncertain. And over time, needing less didn't feel like strength anymore. It began to feel like distance, a quiet space between you and others that kept growing without anyone naming it. 3. The cost of self-silencing. When you stop speaking about what you feel, it doesn't disappear. It changes shape. You tell yourself you're just being considerate, that you're protecting others from worry, that you don't want to make things uncomfortable. Silence often feels polite, until it starts costing you something. Each time you hold something back, your world becomes a little smaller. Not on the outside, but inside. Your thoughts stay with you. Your feelings circle quietly. There's no place for them to land. And slowly, you start to feel less known. Not because people stopped caring, but because you stopped letting them see what was really happening. That kind of loneliness is confusing. You're surrounded by people. You talk. You show up. Yet there's a distance you can't quite explain. Because when your heart learns that its truth has nowhere to go, it doesn't cry out. It withdraws. And over time, that withdrawal becomes the price you pay for never wanting to be a burden. 4. When independence turns lonely. You spent many years learning how to stand on your own, how to solve things quietly, how to manage without asking, how to be dependable. At first, that independence felt empowering. It meant freedom, control, self-respect. Independence becomes lonely when no one knows what you're carrying. Over time, people stopped checking in, not because they didn't care, but because you seemed to have everything handled. You were the one who didn't need much, the one who never asked, the one who always said, I'm fine. And somewhere along the way, your independence stopped feeling like choice. It became a wall, not a dramatic one, just high enough that others didn't know how to step closer. So you kept managing alone. But on the quieter days, you noticed something missing. Not help, not attention, presence. Someone who could sit with you without you having to explain why you're tired of carrying everything by yourself. That's when independence starts to feel like isolation, and the loneliness becomes harder to ignore. 5. Why asking feels harder now. Asking used to feel simpler. You didn't overthink it. You didn't weigh every word. But now, even the thought of asking makes you hesitate. You wonder if it's worth it, if you'll be misunderstood, if you'll feel exposed afterward. Asking feels harder when you've learned to survive without it. You've lived long enough to know that not every request is met with care. Sometimes it's met with silence, or discomfort, or quick solutions you didn't ask for. So you protect yourself. You tell yourself, I'll figure it out. I don't want to make it awkward. And in doing so, you keep the peace, but at a cost. Because every unasked question, every need you swallow, reinforces the idea that your feelings are inconvenient. Not wrong, just inconvenient. And that belief makes reaching out feel heavier with each passing year, even when your heart quietly hopes someone would say, it's okay. You can tell me. 6. The difference between need and neediness. Somewhere along the way, needing someone started to feel like a flaw. You didn't want to be seen as dependent. You didn't want to ask for too much. So you learned to keep your needs small. Needing connection is not the same as being needy. Needing is human. It's wanting to be heard, to be checked on, to matter to someone else for a moment. Neediness is different. It asks for reassurance without listening. It demands constant attention. But needing connection, especially at this stage of life, is about wanting presence, not rescue. You're not asking someone to fix you. You're asking them to sit with you. And that distinction matters. Because when you confuse need with neediness, you deny yourself something essential. You tell your heart it must carry everything alone. But the truth is, connection isn't a weakness you outgrow. It's a need that becomes clearer as everything else falls away. And honoring that need doesn't make you a burden. It makes you honest. 7. What gentle connection looks like at this age. Connection at this stage of life doesn't look the way it used to. It's quieter now, slower, less demanding. You're not looking for constant contact. You're not asking for long explanations. You're looking for ease. Gentle connection feels safe because it doesn't ask you to perform. It's someone who doesn't rush your words, who lets silence sit without filling it, who notices when you're tired without you having to say it out loud. It's a message that doesn't require a reply, a presence that doesn't need fixing. You don't want to be entertained. You don't want advice. You want to feel considered. To know that your presence doesn't create pressure, only warmth. This kind of connection isn't loud enough to attract attention, but it's steady enough to ease loneliness. And once you've known it, you realize you were never asking for too much. You were simply asking for something real, something that fits who you are now. 8. You were never too much. If you've spent years holding back your feelings so others wouldn't feel burdened, please hear this. You were never too much. Wanting connection doesn't make you heavy. It means your heart is still open. You didn't ask for too much attention. You didn't need too much reassurance. You simply learned to carry more than you share. And over time, that carrying became lonely. Not because you failed, but because no one reminded you that you didn't have to do it alone. At this stage of life, your heart isn't asking for drama. It's asking for honesty, for a place where it can rest. And allowing yourself to be met, even gently, is not a burden. It's a quiet act of courage.